Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Wednesday, June 14th. My name is Alan Gray. I am a court attorney at the Appellate Division First Department in Manhattan. And on behalf of the Pride Alliance of the New York State Courts, I am thrilled to welcome you to today's panel discussion, Strength in Solidarity, discussing LGBTQ+ employees' experience in the New York State Unified Court System. This program is co-sponsored by the UCS Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission, and the LGBTQ+ Subcommittee of the 9th Judicial District's Access to Justice Committee. And on behalf of the Pride Alliance, we are incredibly grateful to all of our partners for helping to make this event possible, and to all of you for being here today. The mission of the Pride Alliance of the New York State Courts is to establish a network of ideas, activities, and resources designed to promote fellowship among and the career enhancement and fair representation of LGBTQ+ people within the unified court system. Our membership includes court interpreters, court officers, court clerks, court attorneys, law clerks, judges, and many other titles within the court system. All LGBTQ+ people and allies currently or formerly employed by the Unified Court System are welcome to join. And for more information about us or to join our organization, you can email us at the address on your screen, info@pridealliancenyscourts.org. I also want to share with you that we will be having our first in-person social event since the COVID-19 public health emergency. We are going to be getting together next Wednesday, June 21st, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Serafina's on West Broadway in Manhattan. We would love for anyone and everyone who's here today to join us. You can RSVP using the link that you see on your screen, or you can scan the QR code that you see, and it'll take you to the same location. We will also show this again at the end of our program, and everyone attending today will also get a follow-up email. We'll ask you to give some feedback on today's program, and we'll include this information as well. So again, we hope that you will consider joining us, celebrating Pride, celebrating our LGBTQ+ people within the court system, and finally getting a chance to socialize with one another after such a long time apart. The theme of this year's NYC Pride is Strength in Solidarity, and it is also the topic for today's panel discussion. Merriam-Webster defines solidarity as unity as of a class or group that produces or is based on community of interests, objectives, and standards. NYC Pride said this in its press release announcing the theme for this year, quote, "Amidst a backdrop of increased attacks against members of the LGBTQIA+ community, especially in the form of legislation and physical violence that directly targets trans and BIPOC individuals, NYC Pride seeks to spotlight the power and resiliency of the community and its allies. This year's theme highlights the cultural significance of the LGBTQIA+ community within the fabric of modern society, while acknowledging every individual's uniqueness and ability to wield tremendous power when united with others. In a world where platforms of hatred and violence are upheld and even celebrated, NYC Pride seeks to illuminate the good that can and has been accomplished through uplifting and supporting one another. Fear and intimidation only serve to isolate and diminish the community and its allies. But when individuals unite, strength in solidarity is truly unlimited." And these are the ideas that I'd like to discuss with our panelists today, and particularly with an eye on our experiences previously and presently, and our hopes going forward within the New York State Unified Court System. As I mentioned, our organization, the Pride Alliance, has members across job titles, and we've done our best to do that with today's panelists, not only in their job titles, but also geographically around the state, because my experience in the First Department in Manhattan may not be the same as your experience somewhere else in the state. So I'm delighted to our four panelists who've agreed to join me today, and I'm thrilled to introduce them to you now. First, Ronald Pawelczak is the district executive for the 7th Judicial District, which encompasses Cayuga, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Seneca, Steuben, Wayne, and Yates counties within the 4th Department. Ron received his bachelor's degree in political science from Niagara University in 1985 and began working as a court assistant in Rochester City Court in 1988. He then worked at the Family Court, Monroe County, beginning in 1992, and received his master's in public administration from SUNY Brockport in 1995. In 2000, he was appointed the district executive of the 7th Judicial District, in which role he is responsible for implementing and enforcing the policies, rules, and directives of the chief judge, the chief administrative judge, and the deputy chief administrative judge, for assisting the district administrative judge, the Honorable William K. Taylor, in providing the administrative support and supervision to all trial courts and agencies within the district, and for personnel, purchasing, budgets, revenue, computer automation, court interpreters, court security, and case management. Ron is also a decorated veteran of the United States Army, serving in Operation Desert Shield and Operation Desert Storm, before being honorably discharged as a first lieutenant. Ron is also an active member of the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission and was featured in Justice and Fairness for All, Dignity and Respect in the New York State Unified Court System, the first session of the Unified Court System's online implicit bias training series for all employees. Thank you very much, Ron, for being with us today. The Honorable Grace Hanlon is a Justice of the Supreme Court, Chautauqua County in Mayville. Justice Hanlon is the first openly LGBTQ+ person elected to the Supreme Court in the 8th Judicial District, which also encompasses Allegheny, Cattaraugus, Erie, Genesee, Niagara, Orleans, and Wyoming counties, also within the 4th Department. She received her bachelor's degree in English Language and Literature from the University at Buffalo in 1986, and her law degree from what is now the Elizabeth Haub School of Law at Pace University in White Plains in 1989. She began her legal career at a small personal injury firm in Saranac Lake before joining the Chautauqua County District Attorney's Office as an ADA in 1992. She moved to private practice in a general litigation firm in 1995 and became a partner of the firm in 1999. Justice Hanlon then rejoined the district attorney's office as a first assistant district attorney in 2006. In 2015, she became the principal law clerk to Judge John T. Ward and continued on as the principal law clerk to Judge David Foley beginning in 2016, both of the county court, Chautauqua County, until her election to the Supreme Court bench in 2022. Justice Hanlon received the 8th Judicial District Gender and Racial Fairness Committee's Outstanding Women in the Law Award in 2015 and is also a member of the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission. Thank you, Justice, for being with us today. The Honorable James L. Hyer is a Justice of the Supreme Court, Westchester County in White Plains. Justice Hyer is also the first openly LGBTQ+ person elected in his judicial district, which is the 9th Judicial District and includes Westchester, Rockland, Dutchess, Putnam, and Orange counties within the 2nd Department. I'm sorry, I should say the first LGBTQ+ person elected to Supreme Court in the 9th Judicial District. He received his bachelor's degree from Ramapo College of New Jersey in 2001 and his law degree from the Elizabeth Haub School of Law at Pace in 2005. Before taking the bench, he worked in private practice, was an administrative law judge for the Westchester County Human Rights Commission, and corporation counsel for the Legal Aid Society of Westchester County. Justice Hyer is a past president of the Westchester County Bar Association and chairs the 9th Judicial District's Access to Justice Committee, with the LGBTQ+ subcommittee of which, as I mentioned, is a co-sponsor of today's program, and of which I should say I am also a member. Justice Hyer has received numerous awards for his leadership and advocacy, including the Westchester County Bar Association's New Lawyers Leadership Award in 2014, Pace Law School's Leading Attorney Under 40 Award in 2015, Westchester Residential Opportunities' Human Rights Leadership Award in 2017, and a New York State Senate Commendation for Human Rights Advocacy in 2020. Justice Hyer is also a member of the Pride Alliance, as well as the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission, and he spearheaded the effort to create a bench card for judges on how to speak to and about transgender litigants, which has been adopted not only by the Unified Court System, but also the New York State Bar Association and the American Bar Association. Justice Hyer, a pleasure to have you with us again this year. Finally, Dan Santiago-Stewart is a senior management analyst at OCA in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or ODI. He began his court career in 1996 as a senior court office assistant and received his bachelor's degree with honors in business management with a minor in communications and marketing from Mount St. Mary College in 2006. Before moving to OCA in 2016, Dan worked in a variety of titles in courts all over the 9th Judicial District and New York City, including city, family, county, and Supreme Courts. At OCA, he joined the Professional Development Department as an educator and trainer. Dan's diverse work history includes courtroom and back office experience, research, curriculum development, training, and supervision. In 2021, he was offered the opportunity to join ODI and help promote recruitment and retention of a diverse workforce for the Unified Court System. I should also mention Dan was instrumental in organizing this panel last year, and I'm thrilled that he accepted my invitation to be on the panel this year. Dan, thank you so much for being with us today. So as I mentioned, our Pride Alliance is comprised of people of all different backgrounds, and so I wanted to respect that, but also be fair in inviting our speakers to speak without offending either of our justices by doing it in some order. So the best I came up with was to go from north to south. So Ron, you're in Rochester. I think that puts you up first. And what I wanted to begin our discussion with is by asking that we are all part of one unified court system. All of our paychecks come from the same place, no matter where we are or what our role is. But New York State is nevertheless extremely diverse. And so this idea of strength and solidarity, of being unified in interests, objectives, and standards, to me, it seems to assume that our interests, objectives, and standards are unified across the state. And what I want to ask is, just to get a baseline for our discussion today, what your experience has been like as an LGBTQ plus person in your part, as an openly LGBTQ plus court employee, specifically in your part of New York State.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for the introduction. I have been very fortunate. I moved to Rochester in 1988 from a small town or city, North Tonawanda in the Buffalo area. And my experience in Rochester has always been a positive one. Rochester, since the 70s, has been really an open and affirming environment for LGBT people, predominantly because of the corporate influences back then of Kodak, Bausch & Lomb, and Xerox, really did play an integral role in moving the legislative agenda and political agenda and cultural agenda to be more open. So in many respects, I did not experience any forms of discrimination or anything like that starting in the court system. Obviously, if you listen to the podcast I did, I lived a double life for a period of time because of my military service and so forth, but I never found my sexuality to be a problem here in Rochester or with my colleagues here in the courts. That's not to say I'm sure that people might not take a different position privately than they do publicly, but I've never experienced any open forms of discrimination. I'm also grateful, and I would note that the court system is one of those entities that has always been leading from the front. When I started, they had sexual orientation as kind of a protected class before SONDA came out. They added gender identity and expression before GENDA, the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, started. So we've been leading from a forward position. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful that our Chief Judge, former Chief Judge Janet D. Fiore, and our former Chief Administrative Judge Larry Marks had the vision and foresight to create the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission, the only one that I'm aware of in the country and possibly the world for all we know. So from a court systems perspective, I feel very blessed to be an employee of the unified court system. And my experience here has been very positive. I know we live in a very diverse state geographically, We go from very rural to very urban, and I know with that comes different belief systems. And so I'm not naive to the fact that there probably is forms of discrimination out there, but I think we just have to continue down the path that we've selected as a court system to be welcoming and affirming to everyone, because that's what our justice system is all about. Thank you.
Of course. And just to follow up, because you mentioned this idea of a double life, which I think is something that probably all five of us can relate to, that we've all done at some point or another. And I just wanted to clarify, was there a point where you felt like you were living a double life while you were working in the court system, or was it something that you felt comfortable your entire career in the court system being open about who you were?
While I was in the military, I think I shielded a lot of how open I was. When I started in the court system, the folks that I worked with in city court, they knew, but it was kind of I think a protected secret, if you will, for people because of the fact that I was in the military and had high levels of classification, security classification. So when the FBI came asking around, people were protective, and I appreciate that. So.
Okay, very good. And I appreciate that. And of course, thank you again for your service. I know we were speaking about that before we started. Truly, I think your career probably encapsulates again the progress we've made where you started under having to hide it in the military, and then you kind of became the face of it by being in that program that we put on implicit bias that everyone employed in the system had to watch.
It would have been in the early 90s, though, Ellen. I just want to say that I actually started coming out more openly at work, and I served on the Gay Alliance here in Rochester on the board of directors. And so, there's an evolutionary process of coming out, and that environment often shapes it. Young people today don't have the same constructs that we had to operate under. So there's a lot of benefits, I think, for younger people today than there were for those of us that are a little older now. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ron. Justice Hanlon, you're in Mayville, so I think that puts you second on my geography here coming down the state. Again, let me ask, Your Honor, what your experience has been as an openly LGBTQ plus court employee, or even in private practice and with the district attorney's office in your parts of the state.
Chautauqua County is rural, and I like to be in denial and say it's purple, but it is not purple. It is solidly red. And when I worked for the DA's office, it was a Republican DA who was actually very accepting of me, but didn't really want to talk about it. And it was during the time that marriage equality was getting debated. And the local legislature here passed a law that basically said Chautauqua County is not going to follow the state law if it passes. It had no legal effect whatsoever. And about the same time, I was having lunch with some of my fellow employees in the DA's office, and they were talking about it, not in a positive way, the Marriage Equality Act. And the one woman said, and I wasn't out at the DA's office because of the political ramifications of it. And the one woman said, well, we really don't have to worry about it because there's no gay people in Chautauqua County. And I got up and I said, they're closer than you think. And I went back to my office. But that's as brave as I could be here in Chautauqua County. There's a local deli that just put a Facebook post up about how they have a special on rainbow bagels to support Pride Month. And the vitriol comments that were within that Facebook post are disheartening to me and a little scary. I've gone to this deli on several occasions to buy as many rainbow bagels as I can to support them, but it's a different environment here in Chautauqua County. But I will say, working for OCA, since I became a confidential law clerk, I always felt safe and comfortable coming to work and protected and accepted. I didn't have to worry about the political ramifications anymore. It was a different environment. And it allowed me to join the Failla Commission and do what I can for my community going forward. So thank you.
Of course, and just to follow up on an idea that Ron mentioned, this again idea of an evolution over time. Do you expect that to continue to be the case, to evolve more and more in your part of the state as well?
Absolutely. Two of the people that I work with have children that are in high school that are identifying as gay, that openly have relationships, that have taken their significant other to prom. It's a totally different world amongst the younger crowd. So yeah, I have high hopes for the area. Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Justice. I appreciate Your Honor sharing your experience. Justice Hyer, jumping a bit down the state, but going to White Plains. Again, what has your experience been like in mostly the 9th Judicial District, where your Honor is? What has it been like to be an openly LGBTQ plus court employee in that part of New York State?
Well, Alan, first I want to thank you and the Alliance for organizing this. It's conversations like this that are important because it keeps a dialogue going. I have to tell you, I come to work every day feeling very blessed to be part of the New York State Unified Court System. I think that we have leadership that doesn't just talk about the important issues, but they act on them, right? Our policies, our programs, our procedures really mirror, I think, a continued dedication to diversity, inclusion, and elimination of bias, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but really for people from all walks of life. I really feel that it's important for the rule of law that when people walk into the court system, they feel that they're treated with respect, and that whatever the outcome is, that it wasn't a result of discrimination, it was a result of their case being heard fairly and without any bias. And I think that our court leadership, frankly, believes in that. And frankly, not a week goes by where we don't have something from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I see Tony Walters is on the call, or from the Office of Justice Initiatives led by Judge Richardson Mendelson, or something from the Williams Commission, or the many other different groups that are working in the court system towards the real unified interest of these important goals for diversity, inclusion, and again, elimination of bias. So I'm very happy when I come to work every day to see that we know that we're imperfect, right? But we continue to work to try to improve the system so that our court users, the judiciary, and the court staff really have the best court system that we could provide. And Ron mentioned in 2016 that the Failla Commission was formed, right? But it's really only one group of many that's working together. And I think that's important to note. So I frankly think that we have more work to do, but I'm very confident in our court leadership. I can say here in the 9th JD, we have our administrative judge, Ann Minahan, who's committed to access to justice. And frankly, we just had our first annual Prides Award in the 9th JD, and we had a room of 200 people. And frankly, in the 9th JD, we embrace diversity, and we embrace the LGBTQ plus community and people from all walks of life. So, again, the court system to me is just a wonderful place to work. It's not perfect, but I'm happy to see that every day we're trying to implement new strategies to deal with the challenges that we know exist.
Absolutely. And I do want to follow up because I know the Justice Award, the Pride Justice Awards were they were held at Rockland County Supreme Court. And as I mentioned, the 9th Judicial District includes Westchester, Rockland, Dutchess, Putnam, and Orange, which is very diverse. And I know Your Honor sat in Orange County Supreme Court previously. What has Your Honor's experience been with these different parts of the states? Because you're elected to the district, so you're interacting with all of the people in the district. With it being such a diverse district, has the experience as an openly LGBTQ plus person varied across different parts of the district, or do you find it consistently this is opening, welcoming, that sort of as Justice Hanlon mentioned, feeling safe, or does that experience vary across the district given its diversity?
That's a great question, and people ask me that on a pretty regular basis. And I'll tell you, I grew up in the 9th JD. I live there now, obviously. And we have Yonkers, which is one of the largest cities in the state. We've got rural areas where there's vibrant farming communities. And I have to tell you, each area of our district is really special in its own way. And in the 9th JD, through our administrative Judge Minahan, we really have a commitment to making sure that all of our access to justice programs, whether they're educational, pro bono initiatives, or other projects, that they really touch all of the court users, whether they're in Poughkeepsie, Port Jervis, Suffern, Newcastle, wherever they may be in the 9th JD. And I have to tell you, I've worked with bar association leadership. We have almost 20 bar associations in the 9th JD. I've worked with court leaders in each of the 5 counties, and I have not experienced one aspect of homophobic behavior at all. In fact, we have a vibrant legal community, the bench and the bar, that I really feel is committed to embracing diversity and to promoting access to justice. So I have to tell you, I'm very proud, again, not only of the court system, but I'm very proud of the 9th Judicial District. I think it's a very special place in our state.
Thank you, Justice. That's very heartening to hear. Again, especially someone who lives in that district. So I appreciate and I'm glad to hear that that's been your honor's experience. And coming down to Dan with me in Manhattan. But again, you also have worked all over the state and spent extensive amounts of times in other parts of the state as well. So what has your experience been as an openly LGBTQ plus person working in the court system? In all the various places that you've worked and I guess just worked in the system.
So I have to say, I think I've been pretty fortunate as far as the people that I've worked with. I believe that in the court system, there is some truth to the fact that this is a court family. You'll hear about that from lots of people who work in the court system. We have a court family, and it's real. It's true. I have worked in a lot of different places, and I've had to come out over and over again. When I started in the court system, it was around the time when I was fully coming out to friends and family as well. So it was a hard thing for me. Wondering whether or not people would treat me differently or look at me weird or whatever. And in my mid-20s, starting in the court system, I was lucky enough to start with a couple of other people who were in their mid-20s, mid to late 20s, and they were so welcoming. And I remember when I finally felt close enough to them that I shared with them, and they were like, yeah, okay. So it's always been that kind of an experience. Okay. When I left that initial court and moved on to other courts and made friends in those courts, they always were accepting. Nobody ever seemed to be shocked or horrified. Now, truth be told, I have heard of stories where people have said things behind my back, but those were not the close friends that I made. There are a lot of people in this court system who are open and are allies and are happy to have you just be the person you are. And that's what my experience in the court system has always been. I remember coming into New York City and having that same kind of a thing, because now I've been working for the court system for a couple of decades at that point, and I started in a new court again, and I got close with someone and had to come out all over again. And those feelings of having to come out again were kind of odd and strange. I hadn't experienced that in a long time. And that person, that was completely, her response to me was, oh, Dan, you're in New York City now. You don't even have to do this. She's like, we don't care. And that was nice. It was just nice to know that nobody really cared and they're just fine with anything. So that's, wonderful.
Wonderful. And you touched on so much there, Dan, that I want to follow up on, but I think I can kind of use some of what you said as a segue into our next question. This idea you've brought up of kind of coming out over and over again. And as I mentioned, Justice Hyer and Justice Hanlon being the first openly LGBTQ plus Supreme Court justices in your respective districts, it seems to me that, or maybe something I wonder about, I should put it on myself, of what my role should be as an openly LGBTQ plus person in the court system, and that's the idea that I want to discuss with you next. Given that there are places around the state where there may be one or single digit numbers of LGBTQ plus people, or potentially even none, depending on the size of the court or the jurisdiction. It sometimes seems like there might then feel like there's this extra responsibility to be a barrier breaker or a representative or an ambassador of the community. And I think that can sometimes feel overwhelming, depending on the circumstances. And so I wanted to ask each of you what you feel like our responsibility is individually and collectively as LGBTQ plus, openly LGBTQ plus court employees. Is it as an ambassador or emissary or representative, or is it something else? Or do we not have a responsibility altogether? So that's what I wanted to ask next. Justice Hanlon, if I could start with you, how you perceive our role, if any.
I perceive it as all of those things: ambassador, representative, advocate. Going back to when I was in law school and I first started to practice, when you had to be in the closet in order to maintain a job, there was no protection, and you're always looking over your shoulder. This is not overwhelming to me to be the representative of our community in Chautauqua County. It's wonderful. It's very freeing. It's an honor. For me, it's being out here. If I go to an event and somebody says, well, she's the first female Supreme Court judge in Chautauqua County, I stand up and I add, and I'm also the first openly gay, because I want people to know that here. And there was a attorney who had been practicing here for a while that decided to transition. And she came to me because she was worried about how she would be received by the other judges in the county and whether she would be able to continue to practice. And, that's where I love being a representative and advocate and ambassador, because I was able, with Matt Skinner, and he did a wonderful job, put together an educational program for all the judges here in Chautauqua County. We used Judge Hyer's bench card that they talked about. I made sure everybody had it so they knew the proper language to use. So no, it's not overwhelming to me. It's an honor to me. And I try to be as out. And if somebody asks me to do something, whether it's Pride related or Gay Alliance related, I'm going to say yes here locally, because it's an honor. We're out. So happy Pride, everybody, by the way.
Yes, how did I not start with that? Happy Pride, everyone. Thank you. And thank you. I know I'm not local, Justice, so I appreciate you accepting my invitation all the same. Justice Hyer, your thoughts on what the role or responsibility of open LGBTQ plus court employees is?
A couple of years ago, I was elected as the president of the Westchester County Bar Association, and I'm a history buff, right? It's 125 years old at the time, and I'm sitting down, after the election, thinking about it, and it was interesting to me at the time because somebody mentioned, you're the first openly LGBTQ plus president of the association in over a century, and it hit me. And when I got elected to the Supreme Court, and I was the first person of our community to get elected at that level in the 9th JD, I thought about what it meant to me. And I really made a commitment to be a responsible leader. And for me, there's really 3 ways that we have to do this. Leadership, okay, on and off the bench. We have to do the best that we can do in our role as judges by being fair and reasonable and rendering good decisions, but also off the bench, maintaining relationships with the bar associations and community groups to build bridges between the court system, and those stakeholders. I think that leadership is very important. Mentorship. Whenever a young attorney comes to me, or a law student, or even somebody, I have somebody that's interning here that's in college, that says that they're interested in the law. I give them as much time as I can. I sit down with people, I have meetings with a cup of coffee and talk to them about my experiences. And if I think that I can connect them with somebody else that would be helpful, I do that. I think that mentorship is very important. We need to provide pathways to people, not just in the LGBTQ community, but frankly in the greater community, so that they can excel in their own way. And then the last issue is stewardship, right? We're all part of something that I like to think of as the legacy of the law. We're part of a greater history. We've broken a glass ceiling in our own right, Justice Hanlon and I, but that comes with a lot of responsibility. We need to preserve the history and preserve our own reputations with distinction, so that those that follow behind us have an easier pathway. So I think about those things all the time, frankly. And I tell my partner, I'm not off duty when I'm driving around and we're going to restaurants or we're doing whatever we do. I try to hold myself to the standard of being a New York State Supreme Court justice wherever I am. And it's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's hard, but I know that Justin, she's shaking her head, because it's really something that I think about all the time. And frankly, when I was running for office, I really didn't understand those responsibilities until I put on the robe and I started doing the job. And then I really understood the high burden that we all have if we want to do our jobs properly, and we want to make sure that the institution of the Supreme Court is protected, not just us, but the greater institution.
Thank you, Justice. It's such a complete answer. The past, present, future, institutional, individual. I really appreciate that holistic perspective. That's really helpful. Dan, let me come to you again. I think this touches on some of the things that you raised in your earlier answer, but also acknowledging you and Ron, of course, you're not attorneys and you're administrators. And I asked you the same question, and I guess I'm curious whether, from your perspective, you see it differently on sort of a more administrative side rather than being on the bench. And I'm kind of in between all four of you, I suppose, as just a court attorney. But Dan, from your perspective, what do you see the role being of open LGBTQ plus court employees?
Definitely fostering that inclusive environment. I definitely think it's important for us to be open, be who we are, and show people. We just did a program recently in ODI about intersectionality. We did it last week, where it's trying to get people to understand that we are more than just one thing. So yes, I am a gay man, but I'm also Latino, and I'm also cisgendered, and I'm also a dad, and I'm also a husband. So I identify as a whole bunch of different things that you and I may have some similarities. Okay, nobody needs to focus on just one part of me. I'm all of these things wrapped up in one. And there's a gay anthem, I am what I am. Everybody knows what that is. And it fits this. There's so much to me, and you can accept me for who I am, and what I am. And if we just try and foster an inclusive environment in the workplace, we'll be able to allow people to be who they are, no matter what it is, LGBT or any other thing. And that's where I stand with it. I think that's important for us to do, try and foster that environment there.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. And I especially appreciate your point on intersectionality, that we are one person made up of many parts or many selves. I think dork probably comes up first for me, right? And then everything after that. Some of my colleagues, I think, are on the call. They can opine separately. Ron, let me come to you. What do you perceive the role or responsibility to be of open LGBTQ plus employees within the court system?
I kind of look at it from a biblical verse, actually. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. We have a role, as I think the justices pointed out, not only to ourselves, but to our community, to our court system, to not only work on changing policy, but also to demonstrate positive role models, both for our own LGBTQ members, but also for those who may not necessarily agree with our points of view, and our lifestyles, and to show them that we are the same, that we all share certain commonalities. When we look at discrimination, in a sense, fear always provides that basis for discrimination, alienation, and scapegoating of others. And fear often comes from the lack of connection and understanding of other cultures and belief systems. And the best way to eliminate that fear is by exposing ourselves in positive ways and sharing our commonalities rather than our differences. And I think that's the role that all of us have in our human community to play to make this a better and more inclusive world. So with that, I'll conclude.
No, thank you, Ron. And I think it's even very helpful for me personally, right? You mentioned this idea of people saying, or people not agreeing with our lifestyle, and that's a trigger phrase for me. That's something that just really gets me worked up. But I think your point is still sound, though, right? That we do have this role model sort of responsibility, and so we have to be the better person. We have to go high when they go low, and in doing that, we make it better, not just for ourselves and our communities, but all the people that follow after us. So it's not always the answer we want to hear, right? But it's still probably the right answer. Let me shift gears a little bit, but continuing down this line of thinking, or maybe extending it, and talk for a second about the progress that we have made. And Justice Hyer, I'll start with you. And as I mentioned earlier, you led this effort to draft this bench card on how to talk to and about transgender litigants, which once it was adopted by the New York State Bar Association, went to the American Bar Association, was adopted there. And by being adopted there meant that it was pushed out to every single state and territorial bar association in the United States, which is just huge in and of itself for anything, but especially for this. And of course, it's critical in making sure that we, even setting the national reach aside, just in making sure that our system itself is giving transgendered people the respect and dignity that every court user deserves when they set foot in our facilities. But at the same time, it's one step, and not every judge may even be aware of it, despite it being OCA approved, or they may not have it on their bench, or they may not use it. And so what I want to ask in this round is just where do we go from here? New York State, I think, personally, seems to protect us and respect our existence. And yet we also kind of see that there are parts of the state where it is difficult, and there are issues that are difficult to address. So how do we get from where we are as a court system to where we want to be as a court system? And Justice Hyer, I start with you on this point.
As I mentioned earlier, the court system is blessed to have a number of organizations, including the Failla Commission, that are working together on an ongoing basis to look at these issues and to try to address them. But I think what's important, very, very important, is that whenever we're dealing with a community, whether it be an ethnic community, folks with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, whatever community it may be, we can't sit down in a room and determine what the issues are. We need to reach out to the community and ask the stakeholders what they believe the issues are. So in the 9th JD, our Access to Justice Committee has put together a needs assessment for the LGBTQ plus community. It's a series of 10 questions that's electronically in format. We've sent it out to pride centers, community groups, colleges, other groups, libraries, and we're going to collect this information, right? And find out what the court users and community, what their perceptions are of our court system. What have their experiences been, right, with our court system? How can we make our policies and procedures better? So that's going to happen over the next couple of months. I'm excited about that because I truly do want to hear from the folks on the ground, because my perception as a judge is going to be very different than the lawyers, which is going to be very different than the court users. And frankly, there's court staff that are all important parts of the symphony of justice, as Judge Minahan says. Court officers, court clerks, the court reporters, we all work together as one. But sometimes, even though we have an open environment, as Dan said, sometimes people are not as confident as they could be to speak out. So we're giving them an ability to do that. And I'm really excited to see what comes in. And what the committee's going to do is, after that work, all of the tabulated results come in and the information, we're going to review it, and then we're going to make a report and recommendations. We're going to give it to our administrative judge with the request that it go to Edwina Mendelson, who we all know is the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge for Justice Initiatives. And I could tell you, anybody that knows Judge Richardson Mendelson knows that she takes things and she runs with them. So we don't have all of the solutions yet, because we don't necessarily know what the problems are. So we're going to start with the problems, and then we're going to work on the solutions.
That seems perfectly reasonable. We only know what we know. We can't, we don't know what we don't know. And so it sounds like this is one way to try to identify that. Dan, ODI, I think, is on the front line of this idea of trying to get the court system to where we want to be. So as another, I'll borrow Justice Hyer, borrowing from Judge Minahan, the symphony of justice. It almost seems like maybe you're the conductor. What do you see as the path from where we are to where we want to be?
This goes back to my background in the court system, where I think we will make the biggest impact is by having training programs, programs that we can provide to our employees that help them understand, teach them what it is, let them know what to say, what to do, how to react. And it's the topic of pronouns is so hard for some people to grasp. And it's understandable. It's a difficult thing to grasp, but you can get it. You just need to start to understand it and try. And I think it's our responsibility to help them through training programs. That's the first step, I think.
Let me ask you about that, because it seems hard, right? I mean, you're one person. ODI is a few people. But we have thousands and thousands of court employees. And when we talk about training, it seems to me that, and again, my personal perspective, I don't have the kind of background you have, which is why I want to ask. It seems to me like in order for these kinds of trainings to be effective, they have to be frequent, they have to be detailed, they have to be small, right? That if you're doing it for 1,000 people, that's generally less effective than if you're doing it for, say, 10 people.
Right.
What does this kind of training look like in order for it to have the effects that I think we all agree we want it to have?
Right. It would be a daunting task. I'm not going to lie. In the past, doing trainings, trying to get out there and do implicit bias training in the past, and finding out that there are so many court employees. I did implicit bias for years, training on this, and I thought I was reaching everybody, and found out most of the employees in the court system had said they had never heard about it. That was like a wound. I was wounded by that. So yeah, it's daunting, but does that mean we don't attempt it anyway? We have to start somewhere. I would love to see a lot more training. I would love to see the employees have the ability to go to training. I get working in the courts, that's not easy to do. We have the needs of the court, and we always have to try and work within that. But we have to start somewhere. We have to try.
No, absolutely. And I completely agree. And I don't want to give the impression I minimize the value of it. No. But I, as I think Justice Hyer said earlier in the program, we have to acknowledge where we are. And I appreciate you kind of laying out for us that there are obstacles and it will be difficult. But I do agree with you. I think it is invaluable at the end of the day. So these are the challenges it sounds like we face in making that happen. So I appreciate that, Dan. Thank you so much. Ron, let me come to you. What do you see as our path from where we are as a court system to the kind of court system that we want to be?
So when thinking about where we want to be, I think it is important to look at where we are and where we've been, right? So our mission statement kind of sets a good parameter for moving forward. It says all UCS is committed to operating with integrity and transparency and to ensuring all who enter or serve in our courts are treated with respect, dignity, and professionalism. And that is the foundational document, if you will, where all our efforts, whether it's training, whether it's building affinity groups, whether it's outreach to the communities, is the fundamental foundation of which we'll build the rest of the house on. Leadership starts at the top. You know, the Jay Johnson report brought that up, I think, and rightfully so, because leadership at the top can make a difference. And we've been fortunate both in past, and I'm sure our current chief judge and chief administrative judges embrace the desire to have an inclusive environment, because from that inclusivity comes our strength. And from that inclusivity also comes an understanding of the perception of justice being fair and equal to everyone. And we also have this wonderful entity, the Richard Failla Commission. As I said before, it's unique. It's the only one in the country. I want to give a shout out to our dynamic duo there, Matt Skinner, the executive director, and senior counsel Charlie Arrowwood, for the great work they do, and to all our commissioners who have been working tirelessly at a number of initiatives that you see behind the scenes, whether it's forms, whether it's education, whether it's outreach, whether it's creating mentorship for judges and so forth. There's a lot of accomplishments that the group has done that people don't see behind the scenes. So I think we have a strong foundation. I think from there, I do agree with Judge Hyer. I'm always a big advocate for focus groups to find out if we're really meeting what we think we're meeting as our objectives. And I look forward to the outcome in the 9th. And I think that's something I would encourage our system to do, is some focus groups, both for external customers and for internal users as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. And Justice Hanlon as well, the same question. What do you see as the path from where we are today as a court system to the kind of court system that we want to be across the state?
Well, I don't have a lot to add, except to say that the Dans of the world who are on the front lines in ODI, I think, are extremely important to kicking the can down the road. The Failla Commission, like Ron says, is very important. But I also think those of us that are in whatever community we're talking about, like Judge Hyer says, whether it's our community, an ethnic community, whatever community it is, those of us that are out from that community, we have to lead by treating people with respect and fairness and dignity and inclusivity too. So it's those three things to me that are most important going forward.
Absolutely. And I think this segues nicely into the last question I want to pose to everyone, given the time that we have, which has to do with allyship and our surrounding communities, because our community is a minority. It just is. Cisgendered straight people make up most of the United States, and the LGBTQ plus community does not. And so allyship seems vital to being the kind of court system that we want to be. At the same time, I feel like a lot of people wonder about what they can do to be an effective ally and stand in solidarity with our community. Because it, not just maybe not knowing how to do that, not having that information, but as we've seen lately, that can be dangerous in and of itself. And I specifically was thinking about Target having to pull LGBTQ plus merchandise from its stores after displays were vandalized or destroyed and employees were harassed or assaulted. And so that seems to suggest that if you ally yourself with us, depending on where you are, you may be making yourself a target, no pun intended. And so that's what I want to kind of open up to the four of you in closing is what would you tell someone who came to you and said, you know, I want to support the community. I want to be an ally. How do I do that? What do I do? Dan, let me start with you. What would you tell that kind of person?
I look at it as if you saw a child being bullied, wouldn't you step in and say something or try and put a stop to it? It's along those same lines. The same instinct that you have in that instance is the same one that you can use when it comes to LGBT bullying or harassment or anything. Stand up for somebody. Judge Hanlon just said dignity and respect. It goes back to letting people have their dignity and letting and respecting others. So it's easy. No, easy is the wrong thing. It's not that difficult for a person to stand up for someone when you see something happening that's wrong. Do that. Be that upstander. That's what I think everybody needs to do.
Excellent. I think it's very in keeping with NYPD. If you see something, say something. Right. It seems very akin to that idea, which seems valid and completely reasonable. Ron, let me ask you the same question. What would you tell someone who wants to be an ally of our community or be supportive? What would you suggest that they do?
I'd say, first of all, don't tolerate others denigrating or joking about the LGBTQ community. Attend LGBT programs and events. Support businesses that are pro-LGBTQ, okay? And that I think that's important as well because they do influence the political landscape at times. And not to be political, though, I will say vote, vote, vote. I think although there's somewhere between 500 and 2,000, depending on who you're taking the data from, anti-LGBT pieces of legislation either pending or passed throughout the states in this country, there is a greater theme which I think is even more concerning, and that's the denigration or the attempt or the assault on the rule of law, which is the very underpinning of our very democracy. And so I think we have to look a little deeper and realize that the threats to our community are real and they're present, but there is greater threats to our very democracy, which allows for free, people to get together in a free way and be who they are. And so that's my thoughts on the process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron. I know Justice Hyer is a fan of saying that the rule of law is the cornerstone of American democracy. And I think you're exactly right. And I know we're in the court system. We're not political, but it's probably fair to just say vote your conscience, whatever that may be. Justice Hanlon, same question to you. What would you tell someone that comes to you and says, I want to be an ally, I want to be helpful? What do I do? What does being an ally and being helpful look like to the community?
Here, most importantly in Chautauqua County, that's red and conservative, be an open and proud ally. Talk about your friends and relatives that are members of our community. I'll give you an example. My sister-in-law works for a not-for-profit here, and she started talking about her sister, my wife, and me, and her supervisor spoke in, to me, it's hate speech, it's discriminatory way about myself and my wife. And long story short, it ended up that other employees that she works with have members of the community as relatives and sons and daughters and aunts and uncles, and they were afraid to talk about them because of the environment. And that's all changed. So they feel free to talk about it. And you learn that, just like Dan said, being gay or lesbian is one part of my life. I have a lot more going on, and you realize I'm not much different than you are. So be open and proud, ally. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Hanlon. Closing us out, Justice Hyer, what would you tell someone that comes to you and says, I want to be an ally, what do I do?
I'm gonna make it very simple. Everybody that's on this call has experienced love and they've experienced hate, right? It's easy to love. It's hard to hate. And what flows from those emotions? I think things that flow from love are good. Things that flow from hate really can have physical and mental ramifications that are harmful to the person that's experiencing it. We're all diverse, and we need to continuously think about that, whether it's our race, our religion, our national origin, our gender identity, our sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to learn to embrace our differences, because really there's more that keeps us together and that we can align upon than separates us. And I think diversity, frankly, makes us stronger. So I think we just need to love each other, and we need to focus on the many challenges in our society that I really can't talk about as a judge anymore, that are really more important than thinking about the color of somebody's skin or who they happen to spend their life with and who they love. We have a lot of challenges, and frankly, that's not what should be on the list.
Justice James Hyer of the Supreme Court, Westchester County, Dan Santiago-Stewart of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion in Manhattan, Ron Pawelczak, District Executive of the 7th Judicial District based in Rochester, and Justice Grace Hanlon of the Supreme Court, Chautauqua County in Mayville. Thank you, all four of you, so much for being a part of today's program and participating. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Alan, and happy Pride.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for our program today. As a reminder, the Pride Alliance is having our first in-person social event since the start of the COVID-19 public health emergency next Wednesday, June 21st at 5 p.m. at Serafina's on West Broadway in Manhattan. We hope if you're in the area, you'll consider joining us. If you're not in the area, you're still welcome to join us, but we can't reimburse you for your travel. But we hope anyone and everyone who is interested will be able to attend. Thank you to our partners in making this event possible, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Richard C. Failla LGBTQ Commission, and the LGBTQ plus Subcommittee of the 9th Judicial District's Access to Justice Commission. Thank you to everyone who attended today. We had members of the bench, of the bar, of our court family, and even the public join us today. Thank you all so much for being a part of this program. Those of you watching this live will receive an email shortly with an evaluation that we ask you to complete in order to help us prepare future programming, what would be helpful to receive from us in the future, as well as information on RSVPing for our program. Again, my name is Alan Gray. Thank you all so much for being a part of today's program. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy Pride.